Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio.
And welcome. We are currently entering Native American Heritage Month here in the U.S. So, of course, we had to start our activists around the world celebrating a Native Indigenous activist and advocate. Yeah, just so you know, I guess today is November 4th of 2024. During November is when the U.S. does the Native American Heritage Month. Not necessarily the same as the Indigenous Peoples Day, which is when we do instead of Columbus Day. We've had many conversations about that. So because around what is the U.S. Thanksgiving, realizing how kind of atrocious some of these holidays are, the U.S. is like, we're going to stamp a time of celebration for the, oppressed peoples, so people don't get too upset with us. So this month is celebrated as Native American Heritage Month. And of course, there's also a big conversation about the commonalities of titles and names. We have gone through waves of different types of names for the Native American communities. A lot of the natives, I think, have said they would rather be called First Nations, which makes perfect sense. I've had people say that Native in general, just point blank. And so there's a lot of deep conversation. Native Americans, even Harjo, who we're about to talk about, has talked about this situation about, being okay with saying Native American as is. But things can change. So please note, at this point in time, it is Native American Heritage Month. If that changes in the future, we will change with the times as the preferences have changed and will change throughout the years. Just put that caveat there. I love doing that. But today we are celebrating, as we said, Joy Harjo, a poet, musician, writer, activist, so many things for her Native community and just Native communities in general. Harjo made history by being named the first Native person to be a U.S. Poet Laureate, and she was appointed that in 2019 and served every year until 2021. And she has been recognized for her works before this, and of course continues to get much praise since then. So we're not just saying this is her only thing, but it was pretty big significance. As you know, we love to talk about firsts in general, which is atrocious that it was. Anyway, there's so many things when it comes to writing and arts where the people of color are just left behind because the system is racist. But anyway. Still, we're going to celebrate this, as I say this in a very negative, pessimistic way. But we celebrate her and the fact that she was the first to be appointed as a Poet Laureate in 2019. And again, as we said, she served for 3 years. Harjo was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1951 and is a part of the Muskogee Creek Nation. And though her childhood was a rough one, she was able to turn to her love for the arts and education as a way of coping. In her teenage years, Harjo talked about how she joined an all-native rock band. She wrote songs for them. And then also a theater group at the Institute of American Indian Arts, or IAIA, in New Mexico.
And it was here she really started to understand the importance of her heritage and of art. She told Southwest Contemporary magazine this about her experience, quote, "I was there during the time of the contemporary Native art revitalization that changed everything in the art world. It was an exciting time to be at IAIA. Even we younger high school students knew we were in the middle of a crucial time in Indian country politics and thought. We were part of the generational current in which we were thinking about cultural sovereignty before sovereignty was a common word on our tongues."
Right. And throughout her life, she has only grown in her love for her community and to bring awareness for her community. And it was through her art that she was able to express herself and a love for her people. Here's a bit from womenhistory.org. Harjo had a hard time speaking out loud because of her many harsh experiences. She said, quote, "I remember the teachers at school threatening to write my parents because I was not speaking in class, but I was terrified. Instead, Harjo started painting as a way to express herself." And she even talked about the influences in her life as well. They said, growing up, Harjo was surrounded by artists and musicians, but she didn't know any poets. Her mother wrote songs and her grandmother and her aunt were both artists. These influential women inspired Harjo to explore her creative side. Harjo recalls the very first poem she wrote, which was in 8th grade, which I feel like you and I have had these experiences as well. We're like, poetry. I have a feeling it's not on her level. pretty sure about that, but still, we understand this need. So after graduating school, Harjo would go on to attend the University of New Mexico and eventually published a book of her poems in 1975 titled The Last Song, which includes like 9 of her poems. After graduating, Harjo went on to attend the University of Iowa for a Master of Fine Arts. And then she continued her education at several other institutes for film and other arts. So she just kept going. I feel like she just loved the exploration part, and I love that for her. And though she continues her time in the different variations of artistry, including painting and music, her love for poetry remains.
Yes, and here's what she told southwestcontemporary.com when they asked her about the role of poetry and why she continues to write it. Quote, I believe the role of poetry is what it has always been. Our hearts get broken again and again, but can be put back together again with poetry. It is the art closest to music. It trumps rhetoric, can carry grief, ecstasy, celebration, despair, or joy. It is a tool for the kind of disruption needed to clean a wound and heal. It predicts how we will know who we are in forthcoming generations. Without it, we will no longer be human. I keep writing poems because it is kind of a calling, one I didn't actually choose. I was in an art path. I loved painting and photography. Poetry first came to me through music. My very early years are marked by my mother's songmaking and love of poetry. I loved poetry but had no intention of becoming a poet. It came upon me and essentially asked me to take care of it. Poetry has become my most demanding teacher, one that I honor with poetry and music.
That sounds like a poem right there. I love just her interviews. I like that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So with the many books she has written, she has also written an autobiography. In it, she speaks about her becoming an advocate for her community and the Native people. In an NPR interview, they asked her about this, and she said, quote, the 60s I equated with, civil rights. It was a humanity alert that this country is huge. There's more of us, and not everyone has equal rights. In the late 60s, I was at Indian boarding school in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Not your usual boarding school, but it was an art school. And I remember hearing about Martin Luther King being killed, and all of that was on the news, and we were all young Native artists there from 8th grade to 2 years postgraduate. We'd stay up late nights talking and making art together and talking about what it meant to be a Native person and about history and about how our art was part of history making. And she continues, and I think what I've become to realize that what has motivated my art making is really a strong need for justice, for people to be treated for everyone. And when I say people, I also mean animals and insects and the birds and the earth person that we are all part of. That there's a key element, and that's respect. And when I became more actively involved as a student at the University of New Mexico, I was painting then and just starting to write poetry. I remember thinking, if my work does nothing else, when I get to the end of my life, I want Native peoples to be seen as human beings. And this message has been something she's been spreading in her poems, books, songs, and paintings. And along with her being appointed as a poet laureate for 3 years, she has earned many other accolades, including winning Yale's 2023 Bollingen Prize for American Poetry. And of course, she has won several awards for her music album as well, including a recent work she just did. And with all of that, we also had to end with one of her poems. So that's how we're going to go. Apologies if we butcher it, as per usual. And this one is called Fire. A woman can't survive by her own breath alone. She must know the voices of mountains. She must recognize the foreverness of blue sky. She must flow with the elusive bodies of night winds who will take her into herself.
Look at me. I am not a separate woman. I am a continuance of blue sky. I am the throat of the mountains, a night wind who burns with every breath she takes.
Gorgeous. And yeah, she has like 10 books, I believe, just of her poetry alone. So definitely worth reading. She has a lot out there that's just open. So if you just want to look her up, again, her name is Joy Harjo. She's pretty famous. So just because we're featuring her doesn't mean she's not known, obviously.
Yeah.
But we just really wanted to celebrate what she's doing, give her the flowers that she deserves and many more as she is still with us, and continue to see what she does and how she publishes more and more of her works.
Yes. So go check her out, listeners, if you have not already. And if you have and you have a favorite poem, we do love poems here, so send that our way. You can email us at stephanieandmomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff I've Never Told You. We have a TeePublic store and a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks as always to our super producer, Christina, our executive producer, Maya, and our contributor, Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite show.